Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. My name is Kitso. In my day job, I get to hunt and sometimes take down some scammers and some other adversaries. In my personal time, I like to read about and research on various topics such as, including espionage, which is what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So I built this presentation in Canva, and since we have AI and everything now, I asked it to generate a graphic for me of a person spying on an organization, quote unquote, and this is what we came up with. I think it's pretty accurate. She looks like an insider threat you would never see coming. So a little bit about me. I am a consultant at Redshift Cybersecurity. I've been there for almost 2 years now. I work within the cyber intelligence practice. I enjoy exploring topics such as psychology, law, and human behavior. And I'm an investigator and a researcher at heart, which sometimes means I tend to snoop on people and things. But it's fine. It's part of my job. I get paid for it. It's legal, I think. I wanted to start with defining what espionage is. And basically, it's a very fancy way to say spying. And when you're spying, you are essentially aiming to obtain confidential information without the permission of the holder of that information. And this information could then be used to gain a strategic, a political, a military, or other advantage over the person that you're spying on or the entity that you're spying on. Espionage can come in a variety of forms. Some examples include human intelligence, that involves using human agents to gather information from other agents. SIGINT, signals intelligence, that involves intercepting signals or communications over emails, phone calls, or radio communications, and so forth. OSINT, open source intelligence, that involves gathering information from publicly available sources such as websites, social media, and so forth. Cyber espionage, this involves gathering or actively hacking into a computer system or a network to gather information in that way, as well as surveillance, which means actively monitoring an individual or a group of people to gather information from them in that way. So one might argue that whether as a large corporation or a small business, it is important to have information about other businesses or other companies in your industry, because this knowledge is crucial to help you make informed decisions and maintain a competitive edge within your industry. And that's 100% correct. And that is where private intelligence comes in, or competitive intelligence. It is sometimes referred to as market research, and it involves legally gathering information within the confines of the law, which means using publicly available information or information that you obtained through lawful means. There are also various legal and ethical standards that can help you uphold the law in this case to make sure that you don't cross any boundaries. These include the Consumer Protections Act, as well as the South African Marketing and Research Association, which lays out various regulations that you can follow when doing market research. In terms of espionage, there are also various legal frameworks that exist. In South Africa, we have several laws and legislations that govern the legality of espionage activities. These include the Protection of Information Act of 1982, the Protection of Personal Information Act, POPI Act, that we hear about every single day these days, as well as the Cybercrimes Act. These govern the legalities of what kind of information is legal to have and what kind of information is not legal to have, and how you can use that information. Internationally, we have laws such as the Economic Espionage Act of the USA. We have the Trade Secret Derivatives in the EU, as well as the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in the USA as well. But who cares? It's just the law, it's just the formality. So a bit of statistics. according to PwC, a study that they did, 94% of all cyber attacks were for the purposes of trade secret theft. And this was in some very specific industries. So industries such as manufacturing, ICT, finance and insurance, and health and medical technology. And more specifically, if they were focused on research and development activities, it was identified that these were the sectors that were mostly targeted with cybercrime and specifically for the purposes of stealing trade secrets.
Sorry, is it international or South Africa?
This is internationally. Around 85% of all espionage cases are also committed by employees. So insider threats, or insiders rather, are in the best position to commit espionage activities because they have access to most, if not all, the information of your company. And at various levels, the risks associated with each individual increases. For example, someone in a C-level position would have access to much more sensitive information than someone who maybe just joined the company or is an intern. So I wanted to look at some benefits and risks of cyber espionage. There honestly would not be any espionage activities if there weren't any benefits associated with them. So firstly, you gain an advantage. You get to have a competitive advantage over your competitors, over your rivals in the industry, and it gives you a better chance of identifying potential threats early and mitigating various risks, and it gives you an opportunity to improve on your products in ways that maybe your own R&D teams maybe would not have been able to identify. On the financial side of things, you get to save on a lot of costs because R&D is very expensive, and if you can get someone else to do it for you, then that's great. You just have to build on whatever research they had. And with that, you get to increase your market share. In terms of the risks, if you get caught stealing or involved in espionage activities, you tend to, if you get caught stealing or involved in espionage activities, that can cause a damage to your brand, and in turn, it causes a loss of trust between yourself and your customers, your clients, as well as your peers in the industry. And on the legal side of things, there will definitely be criminal charges placed against you and lawsuits that are filed against you. So I wanted to start with the question of how exactly do you spy? So I'm going to go through some various examples. And I wanted to start with some lower stakes activities that one could undertake if you wanted to get into the business of espionage. You could consider these just on the verge of legal, but like you could still do them. So firstly, you pose as a recruiter on LinkedIn. So it's very easy to make a LinkedIn profile. It's very easy to say that you work at a specific company, ask for very specific people with specific skill sets and specific degrees or whatever. And when you interview them, you ask them specific questions. How is it in your role at the company that you work for? What do you do? What do you think you could improve? And things like that. You ask very leading questions, and in an interview with people who want to get the job, they will be very willing to answer the questions that you ask. Secondly, hypothetically, you could buy shares for a publicly listed company and you start attending their shareholder meetings. In shareholder meetings, various sensitive information is being discussed in there. You can find out about new product rollouts. You find out about challenges that they're facing, anything new. You find out about the structure of the organization. There's so much you can find out in meetings that organizations hold. Thirdly, hypothetically, you could go into a rival store pretending to be a customer and just ask questions. especially with small businesses. Small business owners are very, very willing to answer questions about their products. So if you ask, oh, how did you do this? What do you think you're going to do next? What do you put in this? What's your formula? Things like that. They would be very willing to answer the questions that you have, and you can gather a lot of information in that sense, especially from a small business perspective. And another one, lastly, you could purchase a rival brand's product and reverse engineer it. So figure out how they built it, what kind of glue did they use, what did they use that made it so strong, and you can build your own product from there. So I drew a red line at the bottom of the slide because we're about to head into some not so legal territory. So I wanted to speak about some examples of how actual espionage activities have occurred in the industry across the globe. Firstly, one thing you could do if I was a large company or large organization, you hire a third party. Nobody likes to do the dirty work, so you pay someone else to do it. Let's make an example through a case from the early 2000s between Procter & Gamble, P&G, and Unilever. So P&G and Unilever at the time, they were rivals in the consumer goods industry, specifically in hair care products. And at the time, P&G was manufacturing brands such as Head & Shoulders and Pantene. Unilever was manufacturing brands such as Organics and Sunsilk. So P&G wanted to gain a competitive advantage over Unilever. And to do that, they undertook a covert operation in order to gain some information about Unilever's shampoo business. So in 2001, P&G hired a general contractor, and this general contractor in turn hired a group of people who were said supposedly to be ex-US agents, US spies, allegedly. And these people were then tasked to obtain crucial information from Unilever's brand and the products that they were making. So the operatives who were part of the operation, they engaged in activities such as dumpster diving. They also pretended to be journalists and market researchers and so forth in order to help to find out information from Unilever employees about how they were making their products and how work was and everything like that. So apparently, this operation was very, very successful. And before they got caught, P&G managed to gather a treasure trove of information from Unilever, going from their pricing, the profit margins, and new product rollouts. The way that P&G got caught is that a couple of the operatives were caught dumpster diving and trespassing on Unilever's property. And then an investigation was then started, and the people were then linked back to P&G. Long story short, P&G admitted to the espionage. Well, they half admitted. They said that, yeah, we hired a company. We didn't know what they're doing. Obviously, these things don't correspond with our company policy. But yeah, it's fine. At the end of the day, the two companies agreed to a settlement, and P&G had to pay Unilever a certain amount, and there were also certain limitations that were placed on P&G, including them not being allowed to roll out any new products for a certain number of years after the incident. So let's say you don't want to hire a third party. What else would you do if you were a large conglomerate or even a small business? What else could you do? You become an employee or you look for someone who's already on the inside. So I wanted to speak about Dr. Shannon Yeo, PhD, who was a former principal engineer for Coca-Cola between 2012 and 2017. And essentially, this woman wanted to sell $120 million worth of Coca-Cola trade secrets to whoever was willing to pay. So as the principal engineer, Dr. Shannon Yeo was responsible for looking after the formulas for Coca-Cola's BPA-free lining for the cans that they did. And BPA-free linings were important because at the time, BPA had been linked to various medical defects such as cancer, cholesterol, diabetes, and so forth. So it was important that companies started removing BPA from their products. So these formulas were a very closely guarded secret, and she had them on her hard drive. So it was observed that Dr. Shannon was frequently going back and forth to China to interview for a program called the 1,000 Talents Program that is run by the Chinese government. Unrelated, maybe. The man who was helping her with the application was Mr. Liu, and he was a chief engineer for a company called the Weihai Jinhan Group. And this company was, ironically or coincidentally, also looking to get into the business of making linings for cans. It was discovered also, maybe coincidentally, that she and Mr. Liu were also planning on starting their own company together, where she had agreed to sign on as the chief technical officer and assist with research and development activities. This man, through communications after the investigation, it was found that he had told her to stay at Coca-Cola for some time, keep gathering information while we build our business on the side. And ultimately, investigators found that her goal had been to make as much money as possible, as much money as she could from sharing the information that she had. It was also discovered that the Weihai Jinhan Group had also received a cash injection from the Chinese government, which maybe is also still a coincidence. It was also discovered that she had won the sponsorship from the Chinese 1,000 Talents Group, maybe also a coincidence. But an investigation through Coca-Cola ended up identifying her as someone partaking in espionage activities. So she didn't really get the chance to share the information that she had, but it's the fact that she took it and she did intend to give the information away to the highest bidder, essentially. So, fine, you don't want to plant someone on the inside, that's fine. What else can you do? You can plant spyware. We all know about the NSO Group's Pegasus software and how it was originally created to surveil criminals and terrorists. But in practice, more often than not, we see it being used to spy on individuals such as government officials, activists, journalists, and so forth. If you remember as well, late last year, Operation Triangulation was discovered, which was a spyware that had been delivered to Apple iOS devices and was being used to spy on government officials and other important individuals. So another example that I wanted to give on this was a case from 2019 that happened between Uber, that we all know, and an Australian rideshare company called GoCatch. In 2019, reports started surfacing that a rogue Uber employee had deployed a spyware called SurfCam to gain a competitive advantage over the Australian rideshare. So SurfCam was developed in 2015, and it was discovered that it was being used to monitor GoCatch drivers in real time. Monitoring meaning it would find out their route data. It would also capture information such as their names, their registration numbers, and contact numbers. Uber would then use this information to essentially poach GoCatch drivers. So they'd use their contact details to call them, make them a better offer, and then poach them. The court case for this actually happened in April this year, in 2024. And in the court filings that GoCat submitted, they actually submitted emails that they identified from David Rorsheim, who was the general manager of Uber at the time. And within the emails, you could actively see Uber actually plotting against GoCat. He was using words such as, I want to crush them, we need to be the #1 in Australia, we've already dominated the American market, and now we need to dominate this market. Eventually, Uber admitted that they did develop ServCam, however, it denied that it wasn't used in the way that people would say it was being used. And yeah, we believed them, companies never lie. So, cool, you don't want to plant someone on the inside, you don't want to just deploy spyware, maybe that's too much work. What else can you do? Let's talk about Huawei for a moment. Many of us were pretty upset, probably, when Huawei was banned from using Google services on their devices. I know I was. I had a P20 at the time, and at the time, I was very hell-bent on staying with Huawei for the rest of my life because it's a good phone. But yeah, that couldn't happen. It was at the time when the USA was worried that China was using Huawei devices to spy on its citizens. And that's a whole other rabbit hole to go to. Maybe we'll speak about it at a later stage. But back to Huawei. There are two separate incidents that I wanted to discuss. Where Huawei had actually been caught spying to gain a competitive advantage over its competitor, over its rival. The first one involves Huawei and a Canadian telecoms company called Nortel. So in 2014, it was discovered that Nortel's systems had been invaded by a threat actor traced back to China for at least 10 years. So these people were in the systems for at least 10 years. The hack had resulted in the exfiltration of hundreds of sensitive information. These people had also acquired sensitive credentials of executives, including those of the CEO. Later on, it was discovered that listening devices had also been placed in Nortel's research and development complex. Nortel's security personnel also reported various incidences where people had purchased the product and then brought it back, and it looked like it had been pulled apart and reverse engineered. Sources also discovered that there had been malware that was planted on the CEO's cell phone that was recording every single call that they made. This hack was then later traced back to Huawei, definitively. Huawei had used this information to better their products and essentially gain a competitive advantage over Nortel in Canada. Although Nortel had already been facing financial issues at the time, it is said that the hack could have been the reason why Nortel fell off. It could have been the nail in the coffin. In the end, Huawei grew and Nortel faded into oblivion. Eventually, they went bankrupt. Now, apparently, on the wall of fame that is on Huawei's Shenzhen campus in China, you can see various former employees from Nortel hung on the wall, associated with really, really great technological accomplishments. Could be a coincidence, maybe not. Another instance that I wanted to talk about where Huawei was caught is an instance from 2019 in Denmark. So on the 5th of March 2019 in Denmark, a meeting was supposed to happen where TDC, which is Denmark's telecommunications, was supposed to announce the decision that they made for the company that they were going with to help them move or take the leap into a 5G wireless network. The bids were between two companies, Huawei Technology and a Swedish company called Ericsson. Obviously, both companies wanted to win, but at the time, Huawei winning would have held much more symbolic value. Because 2019 was a time when governments in the West, specifically USA, were heeding governments in the EU from working with Chinese companies such as Huawei. It was still around the time when the USA was thinking that Huawei was hacking or Huawei was stealing information of USA citizens. So the meeting was supposed to happen on the 5th of March 2019, and at 2:52 a.m. on that morning, for some reason, Huawei decided to make a last-minute emergency bid. The bid undercut Ericsson's by just enough for them to not lose too much money, but to also be favorable to TDC. So this was funny because weeks earlier, Huawei had said that the bid that they had already made was their last and final offer. We're not changing, we're not moving. And it was also funny because how could they undercut Ericsson if competitors weren't supposed to know about each other's bids? So this prompted an investigation by TDC. The investigation ultimately revealed that TDC's boardrooms had been bugged. There were listening devices placed, and one of TDC's directors had been paid off to pass off various information about their competitors' bids. During the investigation, several TDC employees also reported that they had been followed by drones and been tailed around the city by cars, and ultimately it was discovered that Huawei had been behind all of these activities. It's safe to say that they did not win the bid. So what's next? What else could you do? What if I am not a small business? I am not a large conglomerate? What else is it that I can do? I can be one of the world's largest economies. So we all have heard about the USA spying on everybody. I think at this point, everyone expects that there are American spies stationed in some very important spaces everywhere across the world. The CIA, as we know it, the elusive ones. I have also discussed at least 2 examples today of espionage that involved meddling by the Chinese government. So while discussing the story on Coca-Cola, I mentioned that Dr. Shannon Yeo was interviewing for the 1,000 Talents program in China, which she won, by the way, before she got arrested. I don't think she still has it. Many people have speculated that the 1,000 Talents program is not a farce, but mainly aims to attract foreign experts to bring knowledge and technology back to China. This sometimes involves the theft of trade secrets and intellectual property. Participants in these programs, including scientists and researchers, may be required to share technological advancements with China, sometimes breaking laws and export control regulations. Granted, these are allegations that are made mainly by the USA. They seem to have a thing going on between the two. There's literally a page on the FBI website that's called the China Threat that details how this program could harm the USA. But we know that at least on one occasion, these allegations would have been considered true, as discussed earlier. I mean, has anyone else ever wondered why almost overnight there are so many Chinese EVs on our roads? Just me? Okay, cool. Russia. I know Russia is not in the top 10 economies of the world at the moment. I think it's number 11, last I checked. But it is considered a very big player in this never-ending game of espionage between countries. It's like a monopoly, it never ends. Maybe that's why it's called a monopoly. It has been alleged according to intelligence agencies, again in the USA, because they're so paranoid, that Russia had interfered in the 2016 elections between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Several individuals were also arrested with regards to this. I don't know whether or not the charges that were placed forth against them were true or not, but I'm still going to say alleged. Russia allegedly leveraged social media propaganda. They hacked into Hillary Clinton's emails as well and leaked the emails, all in an attempt to establish connections with Trump's campaign. Russia also has a lot of well-known APTs, such as APT 28, known as Fancy Bear, and APT 29, known as Cozy Bear. And these have been implicated in various high-profile cyber attacks that resulted in information warfare and cyber espionage. Russia has also been observed infiltrating emerging markets and regional powers, including Europe, Africa, Asia, and Latin America. That's pretty much the whole world. Having said all of that, I wanted to pose the question, should you have a private intelligence or counterintelligence unit in your organizations? This can be beneficial, especially if your organization is within an industry with high-value intellectual property, sensitive data, or strategic information. However, there are various factors that you can consider when deciding this. Is it feasible? Think about your organization size. Are you large enough to have a unit like that? Costing, do you have the resources to have a unit like that? And is it possible? Would you really be able to notice if an employee of yours sold information? I don't think so, maybe. And could you tell if people were doing interviews elsewhere? I think people are free to want to change jobs and so forth. So could you really tell if someone was maybe doing an interview with someone who wanted to spy on your organization? And could that be considered micromanaging if you're asking everyone where you're going, what's on your laptop, did you do that interview, and so forth? So it boils down to whether you can afford it and whether you think the information that you have is important enough that someone would go to the lengths discussed in this presentation to get it. For countries, however, having robust counterintelligence capabilities is crucial for national security. It is crucial. It's crucial for economic stability as well, and safeguarding the sensitive information of the country and the citizens within. So I'll leave that decision to you guys. With that, with that being said, I wanted to end off with a quote by an author that we all know, Sun Tzu. And it says that the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself, which, as we discussed, it's obviously through spying. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to my talk. Any questions? Awesome. Oh, yes.
So in your research, have you given thought to some of the online marketplaces, given some thought to some of the online marketplaces, Shein, Temu, Alibaba?
Yes. Yes, definitely. There have been so many reports that have come out. Places like Shein, Temu have been actually involved in exfiltrating data. It's important to note when you sign up to things. I know everyone says this when they're doing cybersecurity talks. It's important to note when you sign up to things, what are they asking permission for? Because sometimes we inadvertently do give out this information, and then we're like, oh, they were spying on us. But it's information that we gave permission to them to have. So there is a lot of information that is being shared around everywhere, but yes, definitely those have been implicated in a lot of scandals recently. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. Just on specifically when it comes to changing these privacy terms. Thank you. Specifically when it comes to changing these terms and conditions associated with privacy policies, we're seeing like these cases very recently where large organizations would amend their privacy policy in a way to maybe support an internal prerogative of developing models to compete in that race, or in other cases achieve a competitive advantage, specifically when it comes to a trade war or the like. What other examples have you seen that would be particularly interesting of organizations really changing those terms and conditions maliciously, or within the bounds of the law, but still in a grey way?
I wouldn't say in terms of changing privacy policies, but a very big example that I saw of organizations playing within the bounds of the law is using competitive intelligence firms. So if you just Google competitive intelligence firms, there are so many. And these people offer the service to companies of saying, we'll gather all the information for you, you just need to pay us. And you don't know when you sign up for that what links they go to gather that information, but they say it's through publicly accessible information, but we all know that there are people such as access brokers and information brokers, data brokers that have this information that they get it from, but I think it's just that pipeline to say, you might be doing the right thing, but is the person that you're doing it with doing the right thing? The next person might also be doing the right thing, but where do they get their data from, and are they doing the right thing? So there's various examples in that case, yeah. So, thank you. Any more questions?
I'd like to know what tools do you use when you conduct investigations, and also what's your favorite type of intelligence?
To conduct investigations, Google. You always start with Google and you go from there. There are other proprietary tools. I use OSINT tools, Maltego, and so forth. But my favorite type of investigation to do is a criminal investigation. I've always said that I wanted to end up in Interpol somewhere. So looking for actual criminals and investigating them and getting to find them ultimately is very fulfilling to me. But yeah, always start at Google. It gives you so much information, and then you just go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, you know that regulator who regulates the anti-competitive practices of companies, are they also aware of these things that could happen in companies? And are they maybe trying to help companies or giving them guidelines to track the stuff?
To an extent, so they mostly regulate for the companies doing market research, and in their space, they regulate publicly available market research. They generally would be aware of people doing espionage activities, and which I guess that's why they would be there, to make sure that the people that they work with don't cross any legal bounds to do that. But in terms of regulating the law, I think that's out of their scope. It's like the police's job and intelligence organization's job to regulate those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Cool. Thank you so much, guys, for coming to my talk. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.